This is episode 1, entitled Work, Financial Risk Management at a Big Bank. Cutthroat corporate politics, soft skills, and the art of saying no. Hello world, welcome to the show. We work, rest, and play. This is where we dissect, decipher, and demystify people's work and their lives outside of work. I'm Dan, your host, and welcome to episode 1. Thank you so much for joining me for the inaugural, the very first episode ever for the We Work, Rest, and Play show. Now, this has been a long time coming, and we are finally here, Season 1, Episode 1. So here we go, it's time to get busy. This is Season 1, and we've got lots and lots to talk about, lots to laugh about, and lots to what the about. So, let's get right into it, shall we? Now, in this episode, we are talking work, where we go deep and get real about what it's like to work in the corporate financial industry. I was very lucky to have had such an awesome guest as the very first interviewee, and his name is Dennis, who is a very good friend of mine, and he was so generous with his time and his advice. And thanks to him, this episode is absolutely jam-packed with so much useful information. Now, I'm sure there is something in this one for everyone. Now, what does Dennis specifically do for work? He currently works in one of the big banks in Australia and works in a division which could be described as internal risk advisory. This is a very specialized role where there are actually only 2 of his role in the entire bank. But to get a feel for what this is, think along the lines of financial risk management for big companies. He has over 14 years of experience in the industry, during which he has also worked at a consultancy as well as an investments firm. And we'll explain what these institutions are about during the episode as well. Now, he has a wealth of knowledge and offers some sage advice for those who work or are looking to work in the corporate financial world. I love his no bull, straight up answers, and he gives us an insight into things like the potentially cutthroat nature of the corporate financial industry, the importance of soft skills, and the art and skill of saying no, corporate politics, actuarial studies and what it is, and much more. So I hope that has whet your appetite. So here we go. I hope you're ready for some fun. On to episode 1. Please enjoy. G'day, Dennis.
Hello.
Thank you so much for putting yourself up for this, mate. Really appreciate it. Currently living in Sydney,
Yeah.
as you have been your whole life?
Well, since I was 9.
Since
I
you
came
were
from
9?
Malaysia.
Okay, so you lived in Malaysia.
For the first 9 years of my life, and then Sydney for the remaining 20 or so years.
Excellent. And you are roughly
30-something.
30-something. That's right, as am I. So me and Dennis, we actually went to the same high school together. So that's sort of how far back we go. So we've known each other forever. And your current occupation, mate, what would you call your current occupation? Oh, I don't even know what you define your current occupation
So
as.
I work for a bank, which to a lot of people would mean I'm a banker. But within the bank, there are so many different roles. And within the bank, I don't think I would be considered a banker. Just like if you work for a bank and you're in IT, you wouldn't call yourself a banker. So I work for a bank, but I'm in the bank. I'm not considered a banker. My actual title is associate director. That doesn't really mean much to anyone outside the bank either.
Do you have a functional title? like you I don't know, you got those generic words out there like analyst and engineer and yada yada yada. What would you say the closest thing would be to that?
I don't think we even have one. So my role is relatively specialised. So there's only maybe 2 of me in the bank. So they don't really make any specific titles because you're also specialised.
Right, only two of you in the bank. That sounds pretty important. Okay, so, I mean, how would you sort of describe what you do on a day-to-day basis then? Sort of, what is it that...
All banks lend money. They lend money to smaller organizations, larger organizations, and then to really big ones. So if you think a large organization needs to borrow money, and part of that comes with other services the banks offer. So things like buying or selling currencies. So if you're an exporter and importer, you probably have to import from another country. If you're buying something from the US, importing furniture, let's say, they're not going to sell it to you in Australian dollars. They're going to sell it to you in US dollars, which means that you need to buy in US dollars, which means that you have to ask the bank if you can convert to get some US dollars. And when that happens, you have what they call currency risk. And so I help businesses with that.
Okay, so is that the area that you focus on, currency risk?
Currency risk, interest rate risk, and commodity risk are the primary areas I focus in. So if you borrow money as a person, you don't have that much risk because you only borrow a small amount. But if you're a large company and you borrow $1 billion, if interest rates go up, then you might not be able to pay the interest on that. So you have to worry about interest rate risk a lot. Right. And so I help with that as well.
So you mentioned currency risk, interest risk, and commodity risk. For the layperson out there, when you say commodity risk, what are you talking about?
So when commodities are things like they break up into hard and soft commodities. The metals like copper, gold, iron ore, those are all commodities. And then soft commodities are sugar, that sort of thing, agricultural.
I was about to say, I thought that it was sounding like the hard commodities are something that's tangible, but it's like, oh crap, that's wrong.
So basically resources, which are traded in the world, around the world.
That's the hard commodities?
Well, resources covers all commodities.
Right.
And hard commodities, there's soft and then there's the metals.
Right. So so metal stuff, which is physically hard.
Yeah. So someone goes out to Western Australia and has a mine for copper and gold. They have to dig it out. And by the time they dig it out, and they start selling it to people who want copper and gold, to make wires or to make bracelets, that could be in 2 years. And who knows what the copper price and gold price is in 2 years.
Right.
Then they're selling it. So how are they going to know if they're going to be profitable? So that sort of thing as well. I help you. So let's say a client of the bank wants to make a transaction with someone. They come to your bank, say, hey, we need to buy a bunch of stuff. What sort of risk are they going to be exposed to? And depending on the transaction, it's either going to be currency, interest risk, or commodity risk, or a combination of them, I'm guessing. Yep.
So then they come to you and you would actually do an analysis and see, okay, these guys have a high risk, medium risk. Do you make that assessment?
So typically there are a bunch of salespeople who specialize in currency, interest rate, and commodity sales within each bank. And they do everything that's standard. So the client comes and says, I want to loan $1 billion. I want to fix it all for a fixed rate. So for the next 5 years, so I don't have to worry about changes in interest rates. And the normal salesperson does that. But it gets elevated to my team and me when it becomes more complex. So things out of the ordinary, which are convoluted, where they need someone who does it full time to help.
So your team's like a risk analysis team, risk
sort
analytics or something?
Yep, sort of.
Roughly.
Internal risk advisory is what I would
there you go. An internal risk advisory. Okay. So you guys work alongside the salespeople who are actually, I guess when we say salespeople, are they the guys going out looking for clients themselves, or do clients come to them?
Clients come to us.
Right.
A bank typically has lending clients.
Yep.
So I'm talking a domestic bank.
Mm-hmm.
So you have all these clients on your book who've come and they said, I need money I need some loans to help build my farm, build this extra bit in my farm or whatever it is. And once they become a client of the bank will go, okay, do you need anything else from us? Since you're a client, can we help you with this, with that, anything else? And one of the things we help with is interest rates, currency, and commodity risk. And the sales guys, there are specific guys who work to sell currency, interest rate, and commodity products to clients in our book.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Actually, one of the see, the thing is that Dennis works in the financial industry, obviously, and to me, it's such a complicated world, and it's definitely very I'm actually struggling trying to keep up here. So I'm going to maybe backtrack a little bit and just try to clarify a few things. So, I sort of, the overall sort of high level flow makes sense where you're at a bank, some people need to borrow some money to undertake a big project like building a farm, like you said. They'd be, allocated a salesperson, see what they need. So I guess typically they need to borrow a whole bunch of money, I'm guessing.
Yep.
So I guess in a typical transaction, they wouldn't need to elevate it to your internal risk advisory team.
Yep.
The salesperson, if they can handle it, it's all good. So when you're building a farm, I guess there's a business loan which has an interest risk.
Yep.
Now, if you're building a farm, I guess you may need to buy stuff from overseas, like equipment maybe.
Yep, that's right. That would be US dollars.
So US dollars. So then, is that when the currency risk kicks in?
Yeah. So if you need a tractor in 6 months and the tractor costs 50,000 US dollars, then with current exchange rate, maybe it's 70,000 Aussie dollars. But when you buy it in 6 months and you've budgeted 70,000 Aussie dollars to buy it, it could be 100,000 Aussie now.
Right.
And then you're like, oh, I've just lost $30,000. What could I have done to stop that? And,
okay, now it's making sense. Hence the importance of your team but then you guys are sort of having to be the crystal ball. Look at the crystal ball
So we don't tell you, so you don't have to know where it's going. It's just the bank offers. So you can buy the US dollars now and put it in an account. So we can say you could just buy it now. Buy the 50,000 US dollars now, put it in the bank account, and you will have enough in 6 months, and it'll cost you around 70,000 Aussie. But maybe you don't want to, but it will totally depend on two things. One being what the bank can offer in terms of products, but secondly, how much risk you want to take.
Right.
Do you want to roll the dice?
Gotcha.
Does your business have the cash flows to roll the dice and just say, well, we can wear it if it becomes $100,000? Do you want to take a view that the Australian dollar is going to move up or down?
So I guess it's like, if there's an analogy with your basic home loan, it's like, do you go fixed interest or variable interest?
Exactly.
Right. Whereas where fixed is you fix it for a set term and you know exactly how much you're paying, or you just follow the market.
Yep, that's right.
Okay. Wow. Then how does, so currency risk makes sense, interest risk makes sense. With commodity risk, what's the situation where that would kick in?
So normal mining company, they've just found gold in the ground. They're very happy, but they need some money to borrow from a bank to dig the gold up. They need to buy all those tractors and all those mining equipment. They come to the bank. The bank says, well, we're willing to lend you the money, but how do we know we're going to get it back? We have to make sure we're going to get it back. And, copper prices are now at $3,000 a pound, but in a year's time, it could be $1,500 a pound. And then we're not going to get our money back because you're not going to be profitable.
Right.
And that's, in a year's time, that's when you're going to start digging it up and selling it. So we're not going to lend you the money actually after all. So then they go, okay, so how about we sell you the copper that we're going to dig out of the ground now, because we're going to dig it out of the ground. We found it, the gold, the copper, whatever it is. And then we can structure some sort of what they call a forward sale. So you sell it now because you know
Gotcha.
you're going to dig it up.
Wow. Okay. So this is all, obviously I don't want to go down the rabbit hole too much, but it's sort of, wow, okay. It actually makes sense now what you guys are there and the role that you guys play there.
So I think if you think about it simplistically, you can fix your home loan for a fixed interest rate. You can fix a currency rate and you can also fix a commodity price, or gold price or whatever.
Right.
And that's just the simplest product. There are other products as well.
Right. So like, I guess when you're watching the news, you know, your typical layperson like me goes, oh, when you hear gold prices and copper prices and oil prices, we're like, yeah, whatever. But then people like you will look at that and sort of be a lot more interested in that sort of stuff than most people are. Obviously, you guys would be more interested in the trends and stuff, but, whoa, okay, very interesting. Okay. So then obviously what you're doing now is highly specialized.
Yep.
So before you got into, let's call it internal risk advisory, what did you do before this?
So before this, I did external risk advisory.
Mm-hmm.
So where companies would come to us and we were an advisory firm.
Yep.
Like a consultant.
Mm-hmm.
They'd pay us and we would help them manage their, this is what they call markets risk.
Right.
And prior to that, I did investments.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So external risk advisory, is that the same thing what you're doing now just for external clients?
Yep, exactly.
So your clients are other institutions that have their own customers?
No, sorry. So, clients would, in that case would be, so same as the bank, like a mining company might come to us and say, we don't know how to manage our risk.
Okay. So you're a consultancy that your clients are other companies who will just go direct to you guys as opposed to a bank.
Because sometimes they want someone independent,
right,
to be able to give them advice, which is quite important.
Right. Okay. That makes, because obviously you have other options other than the banks.
Yes.
And hence external risk advisory. Excellent. Okay. So, geez, it's all coming together now. Now, investments. That's a very generic term. What does that mean? So you're in investments before external risk advisory.
So investments, there are heaps of different investment classes. A lot of property investment firms at the moment. What I was in was a fund of hedge fund. So that.
Say that again. A what of hedge?
Fund of hedge funds.
A fund of. It was a fund in a hedge fund.
No, it was a fund of. So what they mean by that is a fund which invests in hedge funds.
Oh, right.
So I might go to you.
Yep.
You should put your money in this fund. And you'll go, like, why would I invest in that fund? I don't even know what it does. I'll tell you what it does. It invests in other funds.
Right. Okay.
And what sort of funds? Hedge funds. What are hedge funds? That's a whole different.
I was actually
very confusing.
We can get to that. We're definitely going to touch on that briefly because I'm sure there's a lot of people who, you know, may not even have heard of that term before, especially the younger crowd out there. So, but just once again, just taking the thing that, so you called that, so a fund that invests in hedge funds, that's called fund of hedge funds.
Yes.
Okay. Do you normally say it's a fund of hedge funds or is it just called head of hedge funds? It's like a standard term.
It would be called a fund of hedge funds.
Okay. A fund of hedge. Okay. That makes sense.
So
it's
like
a fund of hedge funds.
So if you have a equity fund, so let's say it invests in, you know, Woolworths, Dick Smith, whatever, that would be an equity fund.
Right. Equity being shares.
Equity being shares.
Okay. Right.
Whereas this would not invest in any of those. This would invest in funds which invest in. So it's like a layered fund.
So obviously there's a whole bunch of different types of investments, like you mentioned, like property, equity or shares or hedge funds, and you work specifically in hedge funds, specifically a fund of hedge funds.
Yep, that's right.
And what was your role there? Were you doing the actual investment, the trading?
I was the risk manager there for most of my life there. And that responsibility was basically looking at the risk of the investment portfolios. So for all the funds, to make sure that they were in line with the mandate of the fund. So each fund, when you sign up and say, I want to invest in that, there's a mandate for the fund which says this is what the fund does. This is how much risk it's going to take, and this is how much return it's targeting. So part of my risk mandate was to make sure that it was following those objectives.
Right. Digressing here a little bit, then I guess your role, and when I say your role, because there's obviously a pattern here of risk management, risk analysis. Your role has become much more important post the global financial crisis.
Theoretically, yes. But I mean, it's been important throughout.
Yeah, sorry, I should have rephrased that question.
It's come under the spotlight.
Under the spotlight. That's the phrase I was looking for.
But, yes. But that's, so when someone says risk has come under the spotlight a lot more, that's true. But there are so many different aspects of risk. You know, like if you say, you know, IT is booming in Australia or booming around the world, you can say yes, but not all aspects of IT and not all aspects of risk. So in this case, what I'm covering is market risk more recently, and prior to that, portfolio risk, or investments, which are very separate to the standard large areas of risk you would find in a bank, which, you know, handles risk from rogue traders, from operational risk, from fraud, and all this other stuff. There are so many different risk functions that have to be looked at. And GFC was just one aspect.
Right. Actually, GFC was, what year did that hit us again? That was
2008 and 9.
2008 and 9. Right.
2008 impact later.
So it is now 2016. So gee, that's already, to me, it just feels like a couple of years ago, but it's actually 8 years ago.
Yeah.
Wow. That's nuts. All right. Cool. Wow. That's a lot of information there. Okay. So, just before we get off the whole risk topic, if someone graduated uni and whatever, we'll get to that in a little bit. Let's say for someone who goes into a specific area of risk, and like you said, there's a whole bunch of different type of risk that you can get yourself into. Is it easy or possible to sort of move into a different type of risk management within the same financial market thing, or does your knowledge start becoming very specific to hedge funds? And if you were there for X number of years, it's going to be very difficult to move out and go into, say, commodity risk or something like that.
So I've been working for ballpark 12 years now, and I think the general trend is the longer you work, the more specialized you become. And the more specialized you become, the harder it is for you to move to a different area.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
I think it's important early in your career to find what you want to do, and then progress in that. My strategy, because I didn't really know what I wanted, was to pick up different skill sets and not specialize too far down one direction, so that if I wanted to move to another area, I could. And also, I think that helps with getting a broader set of skills, which is usually very useful when you want to progress into a management or senior management role.
Sure. Actually, that sounds like a really smart way about it, actually. So when you say not too specialized, sort of how many years are you looking, or months in a specific role before changing?
So my first role, I spent 5 years.
Right.
And then the next company, I spent 2 years, and the following company, 5 years.
Right.
Total 12 years.
So to me, 5 years in a single spot. Did you move around in the 5 years, or?
So there was progression.
Yep.
I got promoted, but it's still in the same area.
Right.
So the skill set and understanding of how that business works, still sort of the same thing, even though you're doing a different thing within that.
Gotcha.
That area.
All right. So 5 years and 2 years and then 5 years. So, and obviously even just that will already give you a very, a wide range of experience. Yeah.
So now I know how a bank works internally, which is just like a maze to anyone outside of the bank. I know how a consultant works, and I know how an investment firm works.
Wow.
Which is important if I ever get pushed into a small company and we have to interact with a bank or an investment firm or with a consultant. I know how to pull the strings to get what I want from the other side because I know what happens behind the phone calls I make.
Yep.
So it's important.
Fantastic. Wow. That's really, really cool. All right. Because, I mean, for me, before I even had this conversation, I mean, I've been talking to you for forever. And obviously, when we're with our mates and stuff, we're not going to sit down and talk to this level of detail about this thing. So, it's actually really cool that, this sort of stuff is being explained to someone, because it's very rare. Because I don't know, many of us people who don't work in the financial industry, the moment we start hearing like these key finance, specific, like commodities, risk, exposure, hedge funds, our brains just switch off and we're like, no idea. But the fact that we could delve into that a little bit more and make a bit of sense of it, that actually is very cool. All right. So, okay, cool. So obviously risk management has been your thing. Now, and here's the problem when we talk to people, especially when we're trying to work out what we want to do for a career. You hear all these generic terms, and risk management being one of those. It's obviously you sort of explained what that means a little bit more. But then if we take that a step further, risk analysis, what is that? Is that reading reports? Is that doing maths? Is that talking to people? What actually is risk analysis?
So there's different ways of...
For you, in your context.
Well, there are heaps of different types. And so there are risk guys who just sit and deal with numbers all day. And then there are risk guys who just talk to you and do no numbers. In mine, it's sort of a mix where I have to talk to someone, try and understand what the risk is for that particular company. And then try and find a solution with the products that my bank has to solve that problem.
Wow. So that's actually, to me, that sounds like a very, like you said, a very niche role where you need the technical skills. When I say technical, the number skills, plus you need to be able to speak with the sales guys and stuff. Yeah.
So it's not just the sales guys. We'll also speak to the client. So we also have to sell the solution to the client and then educate them if they need to understand. Right. So it's so the technical skills I feel like I've built up over the initial parts of my career, and the soft skills are coming in now because once you have the technicals, it's not enough. You still have to communicate your solution effectively.
Yep. Right. Because I mean, I know, and for those of you who are listening, I know for a fact that, I mean, Dennis's, say, math is just crazy awesome. Like, he's very strong at math. And hence I asked the question because I was just wondering, because I know when it comes to logic and sort of mathematical problem solving and stuff, I mean, that's Dennis's bread and butter, so to speak. So just wondering, do you use a lot of those mathematical skills in your risk analysis? Sounds like you do.
Yeah. So I find that part easy.
Right.
Other people, not as much.
Right.
But that part is easy for me. So, and I've built technical skills usually get built over the first 5 or so years in your career. Right. And then post that, they say soft skills are far more important. Right. So I think it's, once you get into roles like mine, it's a given that you have to be able to do all that mathematical stuff, use a spreadsheet, build a model.
Actually, that's a good point. So a lot of your math, are we talking scribbling formulas and stuff on a piece of paper, or is it all done in Excel or something else?
It's mostly done in Excel. Sometimes when I brainstorm, I start writing stuff on a notepad, but mostly in Excel. But you still need some good fundamental understanding of mathematics to do. Let's say you want to build a model to run a simulation.
Right.
You still need to be able to build something and build in formulas or macros to run a simulation in Excel. Right. And then if you want that simulation to have some sort of distribution, I'm talking maths here, but if you want a normal distribution, you must know how to create that in Excel.
Right. So obviously Microsoft Excel skills are just fundamental to I think it's not only your role, I guess, but in across the financial
industry, every person I talk to, it's Excel always somehow comes into the conversation. So, all right.
Excellent. That is very interesting. Okay. So, I'd like to sort of touch on, just before we sort of take a little bit of a step back from your job, I'll sort of just ask a couple of things about your day-to-day stuff, and then we'll move on. And we'll just reach for some lovely... Actually, we're sipping on some lovely chamomile tea in normally sunny Piedmont in Sydney, New South Wales in Australia. Fortunately, it's raining today. I actually happen to like the rain, so I'm happy.
Can I say last thing about banking?
Yes.
And people who are searching for a career. Banking can be very cutthroat. So I've seen a lot of people go into banking, and a lot of people don't get very far in their banking careers. And I think one of the reasons which I've done okay in the banking career is that it's very political. Like if you watch something like House of Cards, you have a lot of people who are very cutthroat, willing to stab you in the back to progress. And so you have to be able to deal with that sort of emotional resilience.
Right.
And I guess I'm just bent towards that. I can deal with that sort of thing, which is why I progress further than most.
Actually, thanks heaps for that.
Keep in mind, if you want a career in banking, people usually get into banking because it pays a lot compared to some of the other careers. And the people who do that are, more willing to go further to get that promotion ahead of you.
Actually, we'll stay on this one. I was going to bring this up a little bit later, but this is actually a good time you bring this up. So, I guess that sort of fits the stereotype that a lot of people often associate with banking in general. I guess initially, cutthroat also being quite a general. Well, some people with a very, say, optimistic view might just call that very competitive, or they're like competition and they thrive on that type of thing. But like you said, I guess it takes a time. You have to be relatively thick-skinned, I guess, to be able to deal with
people who are willing to be unkind to you, to be dishonest to you in your face, and who you cannot trust sometimes to look out for you because they're there for the money. They're not there. They're not like doctors. They're not there to take care of other people and save lives. They're there a lot of them are there to make money. And that sort of people, generally higher amount of them are willing to do worse things.
Okay. So, I mean, I guess, of course, there are, I'm guessing there are also some good people there as well.
Yep.
Sort of, I guess, like yourself. Do you like that one? I slip that one in.
Close. I'm okay. I'm better than the average.
Right.
In that area.
So hence, I guess when you, and political, see, this political word comes up all the time. Today was tough because, this project's getting really political or whatever. in your context, what does that actually mean? Is political just people not getting along, or is it dealing with people? What does political mean?
So when I think political, I think about, two things come to mind: dishonesty and willing to do injustice to get what you want. So, the example, most political stuff might be, I know this person deserves the promotion, but I will give it to this other person because they will support me in my promotion.
Right.
Dishonesty, injustice to achieve a higher goal of what they want. In some systems, like in politics, it might mean a higher goal to get a law passed which you think is really important for the betterment of the country.
Right.
In banking, it probably means how to make more money.
So, I mean, arguably, you could also argue laws get passed for to advance the political part. I guess that's where it comes from. It's political.
It's all politics. So that's what I mean when I say mix of dishonesty and injustice in the short term to achieve your outcome, whatever that is.
That's right. I guess, unfortunately, we don't live in a perfect world. And, everyone's looking out for themselves. Some people more than others. And
I guess that word political is what happens when people have to deal with that.
Yeah.
Hey, that was summed up really well. I haven't actually heard anyone sum that up that well, because everyone sort of talks about it, but it's very difficult to actually define something like that. So, that's probably one of much better descriptions I have heard of that word political. Right. So then in terms of, for yourself, I know we've touched on it a little bit, but for you, what is a typical day? Like, what time do you start and finish? And so what time you normally rock up to work?
So 8 to 5 is the hours on my contract.
8 a.m. to 5 p.m., right?
8 a.m. to 5 p.m. A lot of people start earlier and end later in my area. But I'm by far the outlier, and I just start at 8, finish at 5, and try and keep to those hours because I need to do things outside of work.
Right. So 2 questions there. One is, when you say other people work early and later, how much early and how much later?
So 7:30 to 6 would be reasonable.
Okay.
Or 7:30 to 5:30 would be reasonable.
7:30 to 6. So that's like not quite a 12-hour day, but almost. When you say your area, are you talking about your risk management team specifically?
Markets. So I work in an area called global markets.
Right.
So that incorporates what people normally see as the trading floor, where people yell at each other.
Oh, right. Yes.
So that sort of area I'm talking about.
Okay. So about 7:30 to 6. And of course, work-life balance is something that we all care about a lot. Some of us are much better at it than others. I know for a fact that you do it very well. Now, is that because I always hear the phrase "work smarter, not harder." I'm still yet to confirm whether that's a myth or not.
Yep.
Obviously, there are smarter ways to work, but things like deadlines and things like that happen. For yourself, when 5 p.m. hits, normally you've done all your critical things by that time and you can go, or it doesn't matter how important it is, I'm out of here.
I've basically done all the critical things by then.
Right.
So some key things which I've done to allow me to leave at 5 every day is I've always made it clear to my boss what to expect from me and make sure that they're okay with that. Once your boss is on board, that's good. I find it easy to say no. A lot of people find it hard to say no. But if you train and practice, you can say no. It's not an obligation to help out other people with their work. You can always say no. So I've done that. And the last thing is my offering at work. So I think it's key that everyone knows what they're offering at work. When your boss hires you, whoever hires you, what are they hiring for? And when in your interview, what are you saying you do better than other people? And if your offering is, I work harder and longer, then that's what you're going to have to do to fulfill your end of the bargain.
Right.
And then your work-life balance is not going to be very good.
Right.
But if your offering is something else, and so my offering is never, I work harder and longer. My offering is, I'm better educated. I've trained more so that I can offer you more. What I offer is not long hours. What I offer is the good ideas or the thinking which no one else could do. And I can do that in 4 hours and finish my day.
Right.
And that is what I'm offering you. And you can hire me if you want. And that's what I'm offering. I'm not offering to work 12 hours a day.
Right.
If you want that, find someone else.
Yep.
And I'm lucky because I've done enough education to be able to offer that and hold the line when it comes to hours. But if you're not in a good bargaining position, it's harder.
Yeah, definitely. Now I'm guessing that I'll one point to working smarter, not harder. What you've just explained seems to be something like that. Now this, you touched on a very, very key point there, and learning to say no. Now that's very difficult to do, especially in, let's call it the meritocracy, if I can say it right, or as as a corporate environment gets, it is quite competitive, and everyone wants to do a good job, etc., etc. Now, saying no, I'm guessing that's a skill. I'm going to call it a skill that you developed over time, or is this something you found easy to do from the get-go, from your first or second year at work?
So I actually never found it easy to do. Like a lot of people, I think, inbuilt into me as one of my fundamental things I just assumed was right was that you go to work. If people ask you for help, especially if they're more senior, you have to help them.
Right.
The whole hierarchy thing.
Correct.
But I had to break that at some stage because I guess I was lucky enough that throughout my career, I've had multiple senior people ask me for different things. So I've had to learn to say no to one or the other.
Because it's physically impossible.
It's physically impossible to do and keep two people happy.
Right.
And so I learned early on that you can say no. And it's okay to say no. And the people above you in the corporate hierarchy are not always right. Often wrong. And if you say no, it's not no, I'm not going to do my job. It's no, I'm not going to do your job for you.
Right.
And that's oftentimes what happens in the corporate world.
Right.
And I mean, it's easier when you're senior, more senior, and you have the ability to make decisions on what you should and shouldn't do.
Right.
But very hard when you're a junior, and probably not recommended when you're a junior.
Yep.
But as you get older and more senior in your career, you have to learn to say no. Otherwise, you'll always be asked to do more.
Correct.
Like if I was someone else, why would I not give my work to you?
Sure.
And say, because there's a lot of grey lines when it comes to who should do what.
Yep.
Within your team, outside of your team, which team should be doing this work. And if you're the guy who says yes all the time, then you're going to be working 12 hours a day for the rest of your life.
Right. Wow. I just always love, obviously you can hear Dennis has, he always has a clear logic when he talks about things, and that's why it's always so interesting to talk to him. And of course he's just noble honesty, and it's just fantastic. I love it, mate. I love it. It's great. Now this, I'm gonna stay on this note a tad longer and we'll move on. When you say no, generally, I guess it's recommended that you go about it with some level of diplomacy.
Yes. Very important.
Right. So obviously you do that.
Yes. Well,
okay.
So I've been taught the art of saying no without saying no.
So that's the key, guys.
Let's say you ask me, Dennis, we're in the same team.
Right.
And let's say you're a lazy person. You go, Dennis,
I
haven't got time for this. Can you do this thing for me?
Yep.
And so I've got to make a decision whether I think I should do it for you.
Right.
Whether it's because I like you or I don't like you or whatever, or I think you're lazy and you're just pushing work to me.
Yep.
So let's say I decide to say no.
Yep.
The first way I started saying no when I was young, before I learnt the art of saying no without saying no, was, no, I'm not going to do it for you. You should do it yourself, right? Okay. And then what does that open you up to? That opens you up to him going to the manager saying, Dennis wasn't helpful.
Yeah.
I have stuff on my plate.
Yep.
He thinks I'm lazy, but I'm not. In this case, actually, I'm not. Here's the evidence. And then once in a while, you're stuffed because you're like, I thought he was just being lazy. Right. And now I've got a cross next to my name for being uncollaborative with my teammates. Right? So don't do that.
Yeah.
Say no without saying no. So this is what I was taught. Say, and this is part of the politics and the dishonesty and whatever.
Yeah.
But you have to do it in a nice way. So you say, look, I really want to help you. I know it's important, what you've just asked me. I'm just really busy right now. Let me get back to you on this tomorrow. But why don't you start by doing this part first? That puts the ball back in their court for doing something first. Doesn't, like in negotiation speak, it doesn't make you obligated to do anything.
Right.
And you've acknowledged their point of importance and you've acknowledged that you want to help them, but you haven't given them anything. And you can decide tomorrow if you want to help them, or you can come up with something else tomorrow and say, look, I'm actually doing something else for someone else. Why don't you speak to them if you want your work to be more prioritized? And then you put it back into their court. So you can always do that if you have other work which is more important for you.
There you go. Mate, we might have to do a dedicated podcast on the art of saying no. This is really interesting and very important, especially for many of us who are working in the corporate world, myself included. That's something I struggle with all the time, saying no in a way that you're not going to burn your bridges per se. And some of us, it's a lot harder to do than others. Obviously some people by certain personalities will sort of put you in a position to make it easier or harder. But you brought up a very good point where it's, especially in the beginning when you're learning to say it, it's never easy. Of course, it's something that's very difficult to do. But if it's actually a skill that you can hone and sharpen and learn to do properly or well.
Well, especially important in the corporate world because, I don't like all this rubbish and, lying to each other and dishonesty. But in the corporate world, people are going to use that. There are some people who are dishonest and who might just ask you to do work knowing that they're lazy. And they might use you saying no against you. They might just build up ammunition, and at the end of the year in your review, you might suddenly be hit by your boss saying, this guy gave me a piece of paper which showed he asked for work 6 times for you to help and you did not help.
Wow.
Right? So you don't want that to happen.
Right.
And there are people like that. So unfortunately, you have to learn. If you want to progress, you want to learn how to say no without saying no, so that they will not have the ammunition. But with someone you have a good relationship, you just say no. That's it.
Yeah.
But when you need to say no without saying no to people who are trying to sabotage you or people you're not really trusting, then you have to think about using that.
That's right, because we all have our own full plates anyway. So obviously that's your priority. Of course, if you're in a position to help, you will, but most of the time we've always got conflicting priorities. There's always 10 things to do with time to only do 5 of them. So it's all about prioritization and that's actually really, that's some really good advice there. That's really good advice. So quick, we'll jump back to your typical day. I know we digressed a little bit, but this is good stuff. So you start at around, what did you say? 8 o'clock?
Yep.
And then sort of, how does your day start? Have you had breakfast already? You have breakfast at work?
I get in, usually have breakfast at work, read the news, get an update on the markets, where stock market has gone, gold prices have gone, all the currencies, read the economics report for the night, and then I go towards my emails, cover them, make sure if any new work comes out from there or new people I've got to talk to do my work. And then basically the rest of the day is going through the work I've had to do from yesterday, which is, whatever projects I'm still working on or whatever's come through the email today. And then over the course of the day as well, whilst I'm doing that, people will come to me and ask me questions or ask me to do more work. And I just add it to my list in the right priority order. And then I just slowly work away at my list. And that can involve working on spreadsheets or putting together PowerPoints to try and figure out how best to communicate an idea to someone in a presentation, or just going to meetings and brainstorming with people, giving them, ideas on how to resolve it so I don't have to get involved if it's simple enough.
Okay. So, at a high level, that's very good. Now, I'm just going to, when you talk about you have break here and then you catch up on the news and stuff, roughly what time is it when you've done that? Just before you hit your emails? Is that a long time or is that pretty quick?
15 to 20 minutes.
Oh, wow. So it's that quick.
Yeah. So, every morning we come in at 8 o'clock, there's a call.
Right.
For the whole floor, which comes out all our phones on the loudspeaker and goes through what's happened over the course of the night. And that lasts for 5 to 10 minutes.
Right.
And then there's emails sent out summarizing that as well. And then other news, which I read.
Right. So that's interesting. So you don't actually start your day on emails. You do whatever you got to do your meetings, do your catch up, and then you hit the emails afterwards.
Yeah. Usually.
Obviously, there's a bit of give and take there.
Yeah. Because I want to know what's happened in the market.
Right.
And where everything stands in financial markets before I start responding to people.
Gotcha. Typically, how many emails do you have waiting for you in the inbox on a weekday?
So I've got all these rules set up.
Yeah.
So my real inbox only gets hit by, call it, 20 max.
Right.
But a lot of emails get funneled into other boxes.
Is that stuff that you literally don't need to look at, or is it just stuff that's less important and you don't want to waste your time with it?
Usually don't have to look at it.
Okay. Yeah. If you hadn't put your filter on, what would that 20 go up to?
Maybe 120.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds about right. Okay, cool. All right, so your typical day, very, very cool. So then by the time there's lunch thrown in there somewhere, what do you do for lunch typically?
Usually go out.
Out to eat?
Out, meet a friend for lunch.
Right.
Have a chat, have lunch, or just grab lunch and eat at my desk whilst reading the news.
Gotcha. Okay, so it's just, right. So nothing in particular, go out, grab your lunch and so you need to go out and buy a lunch and then bring it back anyway, right? Yeah. Either way. So you eat it out or you bring it in.
Yeah.
Brainstorming. Is that specific to the risk analysis that you do?
No. So brainstorming is like, I think a lot of roles, you have to think, sometimes think strategically or come up with ideas or whatever it is. So in my case, a lot of the times the client comes with some sort of problem they're trying to solve. So it's got to put on the board all the ideas for solutions, or sometimes because it's complex, the stuff that comes to us, sometimes we have to map out what the actual framework is, understand all the different aspects before we come up with a solution, that sort of thing. So it helps that you have more than one person when you do those things. And also it helps that you can stick it on a board so everyone can work on the same.
So you're literally just bouncing ideas off each other?
Yeah, or bouncing my idea off someone else to make sure that it's right and there's nothing wrong with it.
So in a brainstorming situation, I'm guessing that your what you say isn't always necessarily from a risk analysis. Do you put multiple hats on when you're in that type of meeting?
So I guess when I say brainstorm, it's not the standard just brainstorm, but getting to a room with other people to share ideas or to test your ideas. And risk is just one hat. Sometimes I got to think strategy for my team. Sometimes I got to think, how am I going to, help the sales effort?
Gotcha.
In terms of an idea to sell something.
Right.
So a lot of different hats.
Now, so let's say it's coming up to 5 o'clock, 4:30 or whatever. Is there anything that you typically do before you clock off? Like, for example, some people will try to empty their inbox before they go, or they need to check some final bit of news every day and get the latest update before the overnight markets, or it's just make sure your priorities are done and then out you go.
The only thing I have in my head at the end of the day is the list of remaining things that are on my to-do list.
Yep.
And that's also on my Outlook, like reminders. Mm-hmm. And that's all I ensure is up to date.
Right.
So that I don't walk out of the office with something to do in my mind which I haven't written down.
Very good. That's very good. That's good old time management 101 there. So you'll literally leave everything at your office desk before you leave. Just like tidy up your to-do list and for tomorrow. You don't need to worry about it because you know you're going to work on it tomorrow. So there's no need to think about it overnight. Yep. Just park that and then you've got a free evening to do whatever you want.
Exactly. Yeah.
Perfect. That's very important. All right. So you've just described a typical day. In your typical day, what would happen that would turn it into an absolute crappy day? We all have those. So
my crappy days are usually to do with people, not to do with work.
Right.
And I think that's standard for a lot of people.
It is.
Because work is, it can be good work, can be bad work, but really it's just work.
Work's work.
After 5 years of doing it for 8 hours a day, you're not that fussed if you have to do photocopying for an hour.
Right.
But if someone treats you badly, whether they swear at you, they treat you with no respect, or they backstab you, that feels bad. And that any sort of behavior like that can change my day from good day to bad day.
Right.
But harder and harder over time as my skin thickens.
Right. Understood.
For that to occur to me.
So dealing with that type of thing comes with experience. But yes, obviously something, if there is an event or some circumstances. Right. So what do you do? Do you just drop everything and go for a walk, or you just keep working and just try not think about it? Or
I'm lucky enough to have friends at work who I can talk to about this sort of stuff, which is really important. So if my headspace isn't right, so someone's just tried to bully me or whatever, going for a walk can cool me down, but it's still very hard to get perspective. But when you talk to someone else, whether you have a mentor at work or whoever, a friend who's supportive and who can give you perspective, that's important. Otherwise, I can call my wife.
Yep.
Or just, if I don't have anything to do, just walk out, sit in the park for 10 minutes and feel better about it.
I can see a very important theme coming out here is communication. So even when you're under a lot of stress, communicating with your peers, your wife, your friends is one very important way of being an outlet and sort of maintaining some degree of sanity, I guess.
Yeah.
But also, I say that because earlier on in the conversation, you were saying where, setting expectations with your boss, and if there's conflicting interests and priorities, you mentioned that always making sure your boss is on board. And even if you're going to say no to someone without saying no, just communicating openly, acknowledging their side, keeping the communication channels open, as opposed to just shutting up and pushing them away. You're talking it through, and that's really important.
Yeah, I think because people work so much that often things become quite emotional because they're so invested at work. And when someone says something bad about you, says something bad about your work, people take it very personally.
Yes.
And sometimes people don't mean that, but sometimes they do. Or sometimes it's just their personality and they do it to everyone.
Right.
When that happens, you're going to have to deal with how that impacts you.
Yep.
And for most people, it impacts us badly emotionally. Yeah. But to react to that in the corporate world is deemed unprofessional.
Correct.
In an emotional way. So you have to learn how to deal with that emotionally, whether you have an emotional outlet, which works for most people. In my case, I can talk to someone and it'll be mostly okay. Give it a bit of time and it goes away. Some people go for a gym session during lunchtime, whatever works for you, but find something which works, I think, is the main thing.
Some very, very wise advice there once again. Thanks, Dennis. Okay, so then, typical day, what would turn that into a really, really good day?
Well,
is there such a thing?
I'm trying to think about. So I can't exactly think of a good day. Not an extremely good day. Like every day is a good day because I guess expectations for myself is that I go to work, come back, I feel okay. Like nothing bad's gone wrong. And work is just, for me anyway, the objective of work's go there, get some social contact, have a bit of work that's challenging, have a good time with my colleagues, and hopefully we all get along and don't annoy each other, and then come home without bringing any bad stuff home, so that I can go about the rest of my life. And every day that basically happens, so it's a success every day. But in terms of much better, I don't actually think anything. I don't expect more from work. It doesn't give me any more than that.
Sure. Okay, yeah. So I mean, I think that's very similar to me in some respects. As long as nothing bad, if nothing bad has happened in the day, then it's a good day.
Yes.
I think that applies just to life in general. A lot of people often say, "Oh, how's your day going?" It's, "Oh, nothing's happened." It's quote unquote boring. But in fact, the fact that nothing's happened is probably means that it's a good day. There's been no accidents, no disasters, no bad situations. So, I think you pretty much, that's probably the ultimate, the real honest answer. It's a good day is a day when nothing bad happens. No, it's very, very good. Right. So then, when you're, we've touched on it in, I think maybe briefly, but if we were to sum up, if there was, I'm going to ask, what do you love and hate about your job to sort of close this off? How would you summarize? Is there a single thing or what's the main area that you really don't like about your job or that makes your job difficult?
So I think I'm lucky to be in an area of work which challenges me sometimes because it's hardish to find, and I like the challenge. But I think what I'm luckiest about is the people I work with and I get along. And that is so hard to find. A boss which you can respect and a team who you get along with.
Right.
I think I feel very lucky to have that.
Yep.
And so that's what I'm happiest about. The thing which I'm least happy about are the number of people who are dishonest and unkind at work. Because I found that in the corporate world, that doesn't stop you from progressing. And sometimes it helps you to progress. And so the amount of people like that in positions of power and who bully people underneath them, that's the thing which makes me unhappiest the most at work when I see that happen. And it happens too much.
Right. That's very true. I guess I'll just go back on the thing that you mentioned. Yeah, a job, I think that's a job that's challenging and you find stimulating. And if you get along with the people around you at that job, it's pretty much, that's a place to stay.
Yeah.
Cause it's very, as strange as it sounds, it's very hard to get those two right.
So hard.
It's very difficult. So actually, this is more out of personal curiosity. So are you saying the technical stuff is also challenging for you?
Technical stuff is also challenging.
It's also challenging? I thought for you it'd be like a breeze. It'd be like, this is easy.
Because we're like the team where all the complex problems come. Once in a while you get something more
You always get a
challenging.
special.
Whereas it's very hard to find a role where all the complex stuff
Of course.
comes, like funnels towards you and then you get to deal with it because you're the brains.
That's good because you get a lot of the, let's say, boring stuff filtered out and you have the interesting.
Yeah, you get the
bits as
interesting
well.
stuff.
Wow. That's really cool.
But it's also high expectations.
Oh,
you have
true.
to solve it and they bring it to you.
Right. Oh, right. And I guess there's usually deadlines and stuff associated with that type of thing. But you've worked in a way where you will ensure that you'll do the important stuff first so you get out on time.
Well,
Is that the way it works?
I control the deadlines. At the end of the day, my work, I'll tell you when it needs to be done.
Very smart advice there, guys.
So you're doing the work and it's some other team asking you guys,
Right.
how would they know how long it takes for you to do it?
Exactly.
They don't know how many other things you have on your plate. So you get to say, look, I understand what you said, whatever they said. I understand what you said. I understand it's important, whatever it is. But I have these other things at work.
Right.
So I will be able to get back to you with this work done in 1 week. If that's not okay, you should think about another way to do it.
Oh, right.
It's their problem, not yours.
That's very good. Because I guess for many of us, and myself included, a piece of work will come in over the phone, yada, 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 and then it comes to timeline requirements. And I often make, and I still do it all the time, and it's a big mistake that I do, I think, is I will ask them, when do you need this by?
Yeah.
And I think many of us do that, which then puts the ball into their court, and then they'll say something that
in 1 hour.
Say something very difficult. So, like, often I'll do that to sort of get the feelers out to see how urgent it is for them. But I guess it's better rather than put yourself in a situation when you have to justify why you can't meet that deadline. Is put your suggestion forth first, and then take it from there. Well, okay, so you say 1 week, and they say, "Oh my God, I need it tomorrow." Then you'll say, well, then there has to be a different way because I can't do it.
Well, then I won't be able to do this in that sort of time period.
Right.
Because we're not resourced for that or whatever.
Right.
I've got other more important priorities I've got to attend to first because I deal with other people.
Right.
So why don't you start on some of this?
Right,
or why don't you do this?
Do you ever tell them to talk to your boss?
No.
Because you know your own work portfolio. So
I know my own work and I know my boss has got my back.
Right.
So if they want to elevate it to my boss,
he's going to come and ask you anyway.
They've got to, he's going to come and ask me, but they've got to take it to my boss, right? And so if they want to do that, they can say, I'm going to take it up with your boss. Yeah. You're like, okay, if you want to go that way, that's fine. We can play hardball.
Yes.
But I've already won this because my boss has got my back, which is fine, but don't offer it to them.
Right.
But if they want to take it there, you've already won the game there.
But I like that. That's a key phrase. Set your own deadlines. That's very good. Okay, so to perhaps slowly close off this work side, early on in the conversation you mentioned, I guess the problem with us, especially when we are back in the day when we're students, we have absolutely no idea what we want to do. And I'm sure there's a lot of listeners out there who are perhaps in that same situation. Like, you just got... It's a catch-22 situation, right? Because you're not actually going to know what it is until you actually go and do it.
Yeah.
But then you don't want to choose something that you're not going to like, but you're not going to know whether you like it or not until you actually do it. You talk to people. I guess that's what this podcast is partially about, just trying to uncover some of the layers of the various occupations out there to help potential students and existing employees out there to get a better understanding. Now, with yourself, how did you end up deciding to head towards the financial markets? What sort of lent you that way?
So I basically did actuarial studies because I was good at math, and math was important in actuarial studies, and it wasn't as important in medicine or in dentistry or in law.
Right, so I'll pause you there for a second. Yes, that is that is correct. Now, for those who are not familiar, because the first time I heard the word actuary, I was like, "What the hell is that?" Can you briefly describe
actuarial studies is just a course you can do, and typically, so after you do it, you get called an actuary, and they are basically people who have skills in mathematics and finance. And statistics, and combined, they're very useful for companies where you have amounts of money in the future where you have to pay out or receive, where you don't know how much money it is, and it's based off statistics. So like life insurance companies, where they have to pay out life insurance over time, but they're not sure how much, but they've got a lot of people who they've got to pay it out to. They need actuaries to figure out how much it's going to be, because you do statistics and combined with finance and mathematics, you can figure out approximately how much that's going to be and how it might look. So,
right. So that would mean, for example, is that where would you use an actuary in, say, a life insurance company to help determine what the monthly premiums would be on certain packages?
Right. Yeah.
So they would need to work out how much the client needs to pay for it to be economically viable for the company.
Yeah.
And that's what they do.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So when you buy a life insurance policy, some actuary would have worked out how much money that would be worth, because there's a chance of you cashing in on that every year, and how much they would have to pay out. And then they say, well, in terms of equal amount of premium you have to pay monthly or whatever, this is the amount. And obviously not simple. So that's why you need someone who's trained in that area.
Right. So obviously now the other occupations you mentioned, medicine, law, and what was the other one you mentioned?
Dentistry.
Dentistry. So obviously, you're fortunate enough to be academically very strong to be able to have those options for you.
Yeah.
Do you need that really high academic credential to get into your area, or maybe not as specialized as you, but like, is that almost, do you need that to sort of go anywhere?
Well, you need a certain amount of qualifications to do the, my current role, as with whatever role. But to get those qualifications, you have to be academic enough to get into the course. Right. And then hardworking enough
to graduate.
To graduate that course with good enough marks to get a role in the industry. So
a university degree, do you think you would get in the industry without a university degree? Say
it's much harder.
Right.
Much harder, because everyone who I work with in my team can do, I don't know what they call it now, but back then it was like 4-unit mathematics.
Right.
But basically, if they had to explain to you what a normal distribution is and how it comes about, they'll be able to do that and program it into Excel.
Right. So for you listeners, 4-unit mathematics, I guess here for us in our time at high school was the highest level of math that you could do for your university entrance exams in year 12 or your final year of senior high school. So that's what we happen to call it at the time. I don't know what it's called these days, but essentially it's the highest level of math that you can do. It's very challenging for your standard non-mathematical person, but I guess if you are mathematically minded, then it's would you say it's interesting? Difficult? 4-unit math?
4-unit math was very hard.
It was very difficult.
For everyone.
Okay. So it's hard for everyone. There you go.
And I was a math person.
Yes, I mean, I know you are a math person. So, yeah, so obviously, if you're mathematically oriented, then sort of a lot of, let me flip it the other way. So if you want to do actuarial studies, your math
has to be to be good.
Or if it's not good, you need to be that minded so you can, learn it very quickly. Right. So university degree is highly recommended, to go into it. Okay. So, I mean, in closing on that, just in general, if for any people who out there who are wanting to pursue a career in this field, what would be the main piece of advice that you would give them? It could be one of the ones you've already mentioned. There's plenty of advice that you've mentioned already. Yep. But is there anything that you'd like to highlight for them? Like if you want to pursue
I've seen a lot of people, especially my actuarial course, but also outside of my actuarial course, I've seen a lot of people who are very intelligent, who technically were very capable, but they didn't progress because they never worked on their soft skills.
Right.
So the key thing I would say is, you obviously have to work hard at the start of your career and all that stuff, but your soft skills have got to be improved over time. So if you come out of university and you've done math and you've done finance and you've done some risk and you say, yes, I can do that work now, you haven't been taught soft skills. You haven't been taught how to negotiate. You haven't been taught how to say no without saying no. You haven't been taught how to deal with emotional bullies at work. You haven't been taught how to show leadership at work. All those things you have to learn: communication, sales, everything, if you want to progress. Because they say after the first 5 years, it's no longer your technical skills that help you progress, because everyone after 5 years can do the work.
Right.
Otherwise, you would have been fired. And then what gets you promoted is your soft skills. So work on those. That's my tip.
And how do you, I mean, there's no degree in soft skills per se. There may be courses out there. How does one endeavor to fast track themselves on the soft skill progress, so to speak?
There are lots of training courses you can go on. I've been on a negotiating course, how to handle difficult people course, that sort of thing. And then obviously experience.
Right.
And they always say it's helpful to have a mentor who's good at it as well.
Right. We'll come back to that mentor stuff. That's good that you bring that up, actually. So do you find those training courses helped?
Good. Yeah, I like them. They give you time away from work.
Yeah.
But also it gives you different concepts which you can think about when you're dealing with it.
Yeah. Very cool. All right. Last question on career, your occupation. If you could do it all over again, would you choose a different career or occupation, or you reckon you'd stick with this one? I love this question.
I'd stick with it.
Really?
I don't know how any other career would have turned out, but I know this one turned out pretty well, so I'd stick with it.
That is that just put a shiver down my spine, mate. That's fantastic. If you can say that, then I'd say that's absolutely fantastic. Good on you. Right, so so that's it for occupation.
And that's it for episode 1. Before I go, I realized that one thing Dennis and I never came back to in part 1 was the topic of hedge funds. Of course, we can ask Dennis more about it when we have him back on the show one of these days. Or we can throw this question at a future guest from the financial industry. But for the moment, I have added a link to a definition that I found on the web. Just Google hedge funds and go to the Investopedia link. There's a great 2-minute video there, which gives an easy to understand quick summary of what they're about, which I'll put in the show notes as well. In the next episode, we change it up and talk rest and play with Dennis. That is, what does he do to chillax and recharge outside of work? That episode is loads of fun and jam-packed with gold nuggets of interesting information as well. So check it out when you get a chance. Also, if you like what you've heard so far and you'd love to support the show, there is a way. You can become a patron via patreon.com. That is patreon.com. And you can find us by searching for We Work, Rest and Play, all one word, from the Patreon homepage. You'll gain a bunch of exclusive access and benefits, so definitely worth checking out. Every little bit of support is a huge help and goes a very long way in keeping this show alive. And of course, thank you very much for listening. To make sure you automatically receive new episodes, don't forget to follow or subscribe to the podcast via your favorite podcast app. And if and when you feel like it, it would be great if you could spend a few seconds to leave a review to let me know what you think about the show. You can also refer to the website, weworkrestandplay.com, for the show notes, and we shall continue talking with Dennis as we move on to rest and play in the next episode. And so until then, live life, take care, and keep smiling.
And outro music is an extract from the track entitled Falling Down by the artist named Ryan Little and is used in accordance with the Creative Commons Attribution License. Thank you very much, Ryan. Further references can also be found in the show notes at www.weworkrestandplay.com.